Welcome to Coaching Kidlit, a podcast about writing and publishing good Kidlit.
We dig into various aspects of writing craft through a Kidlit lens and provide inspiration and clear, actionable items to help writers like you move forward on their Kidlit writing journeys.
I'm Sharon Skinner, author accelerator, certified book coach, and author of speculative fiction and Kidlit, including picture books, middle grade, and young adult.
And I'm Christy Yaros, author accelerator, certified book coach, and story editor, focusing on Kidlit, including middle grade and young adult.
Hello, listeners. It's Sharon again, and I have a special guest with us, Christopher Cheng, an award-winning children's author whose critically acclaimed picture book, Bear and Rat, which was published in the USA as Will We Always Hold Hands, is a loving tribute to his wife that Kirkus called a friendship tale for the ages. And it's one of the most wonderful books I've read in many years. His recent title is Dragon Folding, and coming soon is Powerful Like a Dragon. Christopher is a member of the SCBWI International Advisory Council and an ambassador for Australia's National Centre for Australian Children's Literature, NCACL. Inhabiting a TARDIS-like terrace, he is often heard to say that he has the best job in the world. Welcome to the program, Chris.
Thank you. Good morning and hello. Yes, it is morning here, being on the other side of the world, of course.
Yes, we have quite the time difference. It's tomorrow for us where you are, so that's kind of fun.
I will tell you that tomorrow's good so far.
Well, good. I'm glad I have something good to look forward to. So, Chris, you've been doing this for quite some time.
Yeah.
You've got quite a few books under your belt. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of how you started, what drew you to writing for kids, and a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, so this is 101. Do not take me as an example of how you get into kids lit. I'm a teacher by profession, so elementary or primary school here, but elementary school. Teacher by profession. So I've taught everything from 5-year-olds right through to 10 and 11-year-olds. And then, of course, I was an education specialist at Sydney's Taronga Zoo. Then I taught high school, and I also taught into graduate school, into year 12 biology and on primate adaptations and stuff like that. And then as part of what I did, I also talked about biology in the genetics stream and things like that for university students. But what do I really know is how to teach to little kids and being with little kids. So that's my specialty. And it was there that I actually fell into kids writing. I've always loved writing. I've got notes from when I was at school and things like that, things that I've always written. But that was just something to keep me occupied so I wouldn't go and be playing out in the street and stuff like that. So I've always loved writing, and I've always written letters. So my godsons now still get letters, except I used to write one letter for 3 boys, and then the mum said to me, can you write 3 separate letters because they all want their own letter? So now I write 3 letters instead of 1. It's a lot harder, but they're my godsons, so that's all right. So I've always loved the writing aspect of it. I never, ever thought in the pink fit that I'd be a children's author and published all around the world like I am now. It's just something that happened. And it happened because I was at the zoo in zoo education. I wrote graphic boards. So people go into the zoo and see the great big information boards. And I would write some of those with the keepers. And then I'd write information labels for enclosures, sometimes with the keepers, and sometimes I just write them and then give it to them, and then they would hack them around and work the things out, which is probably why I also always like working with editors too. Then from there, a publisher in Sydney saw the work I was doing and asked me, can you write this? And of course, you say yes to something like that, especially when it's about animals. And that was easy for me to do. So I did that. And that one book became 2 books, became 3 books, became 4 books, became a picture book, became a junior fiction book, and so on and so forth. And now I've got a whole shelf full of books with my name on it. So I fell into it. So number 1, do not take me as how you get into kids lit. But the one thing you can take from me is I loved it. I've been an avid reader for a long time. I used to escape into the library to read instead of getting bashed up in the school playground, even at high school. And I used to just read for fun. But I also used to watch a lot of television too. So yeah, sort of balanced a bit out. Never been a sporty person, so don't ask me about the Super Bowl or anything like that, because I'll say, yeah, my Super Bowl had porridge in it this morning. So I know how privileged I am to be in this situation. Having fallen into it, I didn't have to do the hard yards that a lot of people do. Yet I've been rejected. I mean, my first picture book was rejected by every major publisher in Australia. And a little publisher picked it up. And what was really funny was a few years down the track, then I have the majors coming back to say, why didn't you show us that? Why didn't you show us that? Why didn't we see that? I said, well, do you want to see the rejection letters you sent to me? It was quite funny. And even now I get rejection letters, but it's usually because I've rushed something, and I've learned, even at this stage, not to do that now. And I never send anything off now until I'm 100% satisfied and think it's perfect. And I'm very lucky again that my agent then says back and said, oh, I love this one. So I'm waiting to see if she loves it, if the publishers she sent it to has loved it too, which I think they will, because they've already mooted about things like that.
Yeah, but there's no guarantees, right? So you can write the most glorious thing in your opinion and your agent can love it, but it might not land.
Yeah, it's no guarantee it's going to get published. I mean, that first picture book was way ahead of its time. That's why most of the publishers didn't pick it up. It really was a long way ahead of its time. 10 years ago, it would have been snapped up probably straight away, because it was the thing. And it's not that you have to know what is trendy, because if you're writing for trend, by the time your work comes out, it's way too late, because that trend's gone and a new trend's come up. So you don't write for a trend, you just write for you, and you write for your heart and write what you know, which is what I do. And I'm lucky enough that most times, or many times, things just happen to fall into place. I still sit on books. I've still got manuscripts from 20 years ago that I don't think are ready yet. I know they're damn good, and I know I will send them out eventually, but they're not ready yet. And yet I can write a manuscript last year that I sent out last week that's going to get snapped up. And it's not that it's trendy. It's not that I've looked at what's going on, because I do read a lot of books and I do get to see a lot of kids lit. But if you ask me what the trend is, I wouldn't even know, because I read so many different books from today and last year and the year before. As you know, I just got back from New York and DC, and I came back with a pile of books. And then my main publisher in America also sent me a bundle of books. So I'm just sort of going through those now, and some are recent and some are much older, but they're all signed. That's very important, because I have a really good collection of signed books.
Well, yeah, you've been going to a lot of SCBWI conferences for many years now.
Oh, yes.
I want to circle
Yes.
back on something you said that really struck me, because you talked about your time at the zoo and you also talked about your teaching. And it reminded me of a book that you wrote called The Treasure in the Trees. Was that based then on your scientific understanding and you as a teacher? Because there's a teacher in there and the child emulates the scientific process.
Yes, it was. I mean, I can't believe you remember Treasure in the Trees. Most people don't. But it's really funny, because I can pick up any book I've written and see me in it. My wife could do that too. She could say, oh, yeah, there you are written in there. And she knew that exactly. There's me in every single book, even if it's a non-fiction book, although I don't do many of those now. But the teacher in that book is actually my best mate, who works in a university science lab in America. And I used to work for him in the lab in America. So, yeah, that's him.
I will say that I may not be able to capture you in all of your nonfiction and see you there, but I do see you in your fiction books, because there's always this beautiful emotional arc. There's this emotional moment that is just, it's so heartfelt. One Tree as another one that has that in it, where you're going along and you're thinking, oh, this is just a story about a kid whose grandfather used to live on this farm. But you get to this moment and it just grabs you right by the heart. And Will We Always Hold Hands, which was published as Bear and Rat in Australia. And of course, knowing you, that one especially hit home for me, because that was written for Beanie. And so it has a much more deeply emotional context to it. But that one, I could hardly finish reading it. It's so beautifully done.
Thank you. The thing about that is that book was never supposed to be published, because like every single thing I write for me first. I write a story for me and I think, wow, that's really good. Did I create that? Oh, and I bombed out in English at high school. How could I write something like that? But I have an editor here in Australia who is also a really, really, really close friend who just happens to have worked with me at the zoo too. In fact, she used to put me into all my major publicity gigs that I would do at the zoo, because not only was I teaching at the zoo, I was doing publicity too. And she used to organise that. Anyway, she's ended up being my editor, and she usually gets first call on anything I write that's heartfelt. Maybe you'd tag it as books that'll make people cry. I mean, that's what they've basically said. They really like my crying books, which I find pretty bizarre. But Bear and Rat, I've only read 6 times. I don't read it. I've been asked to read it a lot of times. I've read it once on a Zoom thing for an event for a storybook structure. But after that, I don't read it. I'm an Australia Day ambassador as well. And everybody wants me to read Bear and Rat, and I just can't read it. It's right there. I mean, my new one, Dragon Folding, I even find that hard to read, principally because Bing never got to read it, but also because it's about an old man and a young boy, and the young boy happens to be my godson across the road, and the old man sort of happened to be me, although I'm not that old. But, it's just sort of the relationship between young and old. And yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, one of my things that I always say to people is write what you know, not what you think. And I just happen to have fallen into writing a lot now that has a lot of emotion in it, a lot of me. Well, there's a lot of me in everything, but it just seems to be a bit more now and a bit more obvious to me now than when I first started anyway. And yeah, there are other little eggs that are now being hidden in all my new picture books, and I'm waiting to see who's going to be I'm not going to tell you, but who's going to be the first person to pick up the eggs that are hidden in the picture books, not necessarily in the text either. It's something in the illustrations sometimes that is done too with my book, which is really lovely. So there are things that are really special in every book, but every book is an emotional journey for me. Every book is the challenge emotionally to write a lot of stuff, but that's just the things I like writing. I don't write funny books. I don't write books generally that make kids giggle and stuff like that. I write books that are emotional. That's just happened to be what I do right now. Books that celebrate life in all its intricacies and in all its little nuances, in the good and the bad. I think one of the things that certainly my editor here has picked up, though, is that I'm writing a lot about relationships between especially older and younger people. And I guess that's very much a part because I've got my godsons and I've been watching them grow and how they're reacting to the world and things like that. And they don't live across the road anymore, so it's a real pain because I have to go down and see them down 3 hours away. But their mother texts me every week, so I know what they're up to. And the boys even text me occasionally, which is even better.
I also write from an emotional space and from a personal space. I think there's autobiographical information in everything that we write and create in some way. And some of us get a lot closer and deeper sometimes than some people. But even if you're writing funny books, that usually is coming from a space that you know and that you've emotionally experienced yourself. So I love that you talk about writing what you know and really digging deep into that space the way that you do.
I just think trying to make up that idolized character and things like that, I can't do that. And as I said, I don't write books that make people giggle and laugh. I'm not a funny person anyway. I guess in any way I'm a bit more serious, but I don't read funny books. I don't write funny books. I don't write that type of thing. But that's great because not everybody can. Not everybody can write deep emotional books that make everybody cry. So it's something that I think is really, really critical.
Yeah, we have to embrace who we are and put forth into the world what we put forth into the
Yep.
world, knowing that there's an audience for us, knowing that there are other people like us who are going
Yeah.
to gravitate to what we're doing.
Yeah, I can't write into those other genres. And I definitely don't write YA because I haven't grown up that far. I keep telling the kids when I'm talking to them that, my brain stopped growing at 12 and a half. So that's where I write up to. But as a reader, you do need the diversity, and you should be reading horror, you should be reading laughing books, you should be reading crying books. I can't write all of those. I can write the ones that I write. But as a reader, you need to sample so many different things because otherwise it's going to be like that dinner that's the same dinner every night. You're soon going to get sick of it. Read a crime book, read a thriller book, read a book that makes you cry. And there are picture books, and I only do write picture books now. I don't write anything else, even though I've crossed a lot of genres. Actually, the thing I will say is the reason I write picture books is not because they're 500 words or less, because that's damn hard to do.
Yes.
But my big thing about writing picture books is that every illustrator so far has given me an original piece of art from every book I've written that's been published. So I have a really wonderful gallery in the hallway downstairs that's 3 levels deep of art I write, and I'm fixated, and I think this is it. This is the way I'm writing it. Then some wonderfully creative person who's much more talented than I am takes my 500 words and changes it into a 32-page picture book with these glorious pieces of art that I could never imagine. But seeing how they interpret my words, that's the beauty of writing picture books too. You think about what we ask the readers to do. The readers are reading our words, whether they're picture books or novels, and then envisaging it in their heads. And that's what the illustrators of my words are doing. They're envisaging my 500 words and they're adding their own flavour to it. And sometimes they take it on a totally different path. You mentioned One Tree before, and people can see that that's got an Asian setting in it. I didn't tell Bruce, who's the illustrator, to set it in Hong Kong or in China, but I happened to put in the book one surname that was a Chinese surname or Chinese family name. So Bruce immediately said, well, we'll set it in China, to himself. And then the next thing I see is these dummy little sketches of this book set in China. I thought, oh, that's different to what I thought, but it's wonderful.
It is. It's beautifully done, and the artwork is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's glorious. It really is. And Bruce is a fine artist in his own right. It's just seeing what these illustrators do. I'm mind blown away. It just blows me away completely what they can do, how they can take my few words and create these beautiful works of art. I mean, what Jackie's done with my new one, which is Powerful Like a Dragon, which is coming out with Roaring Brook, but what Jackie's done with the art and flooded the pages with dragons all the way through. And me being half Asian, of course, dragons are critical. Got to have dragons. I mean, if I was taking you around this house, I'd show you all the way up and down the staircase. We've got dragons. There's dragons outside in the garden and there's dragons everywhere.
I'm a big fan of dragons.
Yeah, nothing better than a dragon. But mine are mostly Asian dragons, of course. But Jackie's just slid all these gorgeous dragons throughout the book. And she said, and I've got the art piece for you. So she's getting that sorted out, which will be just awesome.
I am looking forward to seeing that and getting my hands on that. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about a little bit and dig into is the fact that some of your books are first published in Australia and then in the US, and some are published in the US. How does that work?
So I'll write a story and that's great. And then I'll think, oh, I started that one in America. I should send that to my American agent. I've lived in and out of the US for a long time. So for the last 25 years, in fact, at one stage I was over there for 6 months every year. So I picked up a lot of things over there, and I go backwards and forwards to the States at least once or twice a year. But publishing in multiple countries first is really different because I essentially publish here in Australia. I know the Australian agents and publishers really well. I mean, again, it's a little different for me than other people because I know a lot of the publishers, so I can actually send manuscripts to my different publishers that I've worked with, and they'll say yay or nay, and then it'll go to my agent. Sometimes I will send something to my agent because I just think, oh, well, you can pick who you think it would go with. Most times it's me coming up with who I want them to go to. But that's just me. When you're been doing this for so long, you work with so many different people. You know what they want, what they're looking for, or not necessarily what they're looking for, but you know what they like. They know you. So that's a different matter. The US market, again, is a little different because that one came about because Connie, who's my editor publisher over there with Roaring Brook, she's a friend first. Like, they're all my friends first before they're my publishers, usually, except for China. I'll talk about China in a minute. But with Connie, she's been a friend for a long time. And I just happened to tell her a story that my uncle told me about our family. And it's a story that nobody knew. It's like one of these hidden stories. Every family's got hidden stories. Well, my family's huge. My grandfather had 3 brothers. My grandfather had 5 wives. The brothers each had 2 and 3 wives. and they all had multiple kids, and the kids have all got kids except for Benny and myself and my cousin. So it's a huge family. Like, our reunions are phenomenal. So my uncle told us this story about what happened during World War II, and Ben and I were with him a couple of years later, and I asked him about it again and actually recorded it, which is just as well because he died just last year. And so this is an oral recording, and nobody's thought about, well, what's going to happen to all of these stories that people don't know? And people are going to lose that family history. I mean, we can trace our family back quite a fair way in China. And especially for somebody like me, whose first grandson, I've actually got a Chinese name, which has nothing to do with my Australian or my English name. And I'm actually written on the family tree wall. So I'm very privileged, and I'm very close to some of my uncles who can tell me all of this stuff. But I happened to tell Connie, and she said to me, oh, I like that one. Can you write it down for me? So over successive years and things that happened, we kept working on it, because it's a different market to write for than it is for Australia, yet it's still the same story. I still could have published it in Australia, but Connie wanted it. So that was wonderful. And then what I love about when they publish books in America is they actually put the name of the editor and the name of the art director in the book. And I think that's critical, because I couldn't do this work. I couldn't be the writer I am without the editor, without the art director. I'm not precious enough to say, no, don't change it, except for Bear and Rat. That was something that I didn't allow any changes, but there weren't any anyway. I wouldn't have changed a titch on that one. But with these other ones, if an editor says to me, I think you should change this, or what about we think about this? And I think about it and said, of course, the editor's right, so I change it. Anyway, we spent a few years working on that one on and off. And I had other books coming out, of course, in between. But the beautiful book that it is because I had a wonderful editor who knew what she wanted. She also knew the story that I could tell. And so I told the story first to her, and then I wrote it down, and then she told me how, to change it so that it would be better. And that's why working with editors are awesome. Now, with China, it's a totally different situation. I write a story and I don't speak Chinese. I don't write Chinese. So my English text gets translated in China by my editor in China, who then gives it to the publisher, who then looks over it and then makes his little changes. Then they send it back to me. So it's this real to and fro all the way through. It's like working with my editor here or working with Connie in the States. It's a similar thing, only amplified. But there are things that I can write that other people can't write for China. And that's what's really wonderful. So New Year's Surprise, which was published here first, the illustrator Dee and myself sold into China. And so then subsequent to that, I was asked to do the next couple of books to tag into New Year's Surprise. And I've written a couple of them, and Dee's illustrating them now. But then they also want some other books as well from me. So now I'm liaising directly with my editor, who's doing it with the publisher, saying, now, what does Chris want? Does he want this? And do we want him to do this type of thing? So writing those books that are first published in China is really wonderful.
You actually had a picture book that you and the illustrator decided to sell in China. Now, how did that work? Because you had a publisher and it was already in existence. So were you able to retain the international rights to it, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, could do all of that if we wanted, but because Dee lives here in Australia, but he was a publisher in China. So he was in the industry in China. So he knew roads into China, and he knew a few people, and we both talked to them in Bologna a couple of years ago when I was running the SCBWI stand, and we actually sold it there to them. I mean, we had a whole range of publishers we could have sold it to in China. I say we sold it to, we all did all the negotiations, and then they had to deal with the publisher here in Australia. So we don't hold the rights to it, but that's something, again, why I've got a slightly different contracts and things like that, because there are certain things that I can do so that if I can arrange to negotiate, then that's good. I'll do it because I want the book out there, and I will do it. But my agent sorts out a few of those things in the contracts that we have with the publishers when I get published.
And you have two agents. You have an agent in Australia and an agent in the US?
Yes, only because I've been involved with SCBWI for so long, and I know a lot of agents over there. And over the years, a few of them have said, let us know if there's anything. And again, as you probably picked up, I'm friends first with most of the people I work with before I work with them. And so that was certainly the case with Marietta too. She's been a long time friend. Never thought I'd have to be with them. because I never thought I'd be published in the States, as first published in the States. And I don't have an agent for China, but that's just because we deal with it all, and it's just a whole different setup.
Chris, this has really been enlightening because I've known you for a
Yeah.
while, but we don't usually get a chance to talk for this length and about just what's going on with you. So this has really been good for me to get to know you even better. But is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Just write what you know and write from the heart. And of course, if you want to find out about organisations and stuff, SCBWI is always there with information you can grab once you become a member. I forget how long I've been a member. And I still go to the conferences when they're on. Because I'm on the advisory council, I feel I've got a duty to be there so that if anybody wants to tap into me, and they do, there are people that recognize me in America from SCBWI and things like that and want to come and talk to me. Well, that's great. I do that at the socials. I do them in the halls, and they know you're on the advisory council, so they want to come and talk to you and suggest ideas. Great, do that. And that's what I like people doing. So that's why I go nearly every conference, because on the council, I feel it's part of what I do, and people need to be able to grab me and talk to me. Most of the Western countries, we have writers' organisations and things like that. Now, I'm not in a writers' organisation as such to learn how to write, because I write for me. So I don't care what anybody else tells me to write. I want to write for me. And I just think that works. And that's what I would also say to anybody: write for yourself first and then play with it for other people. But you've got to write for yourself first. You've got to write and be happy with what you're writing. There are certain things you need to learn about the craft of writing that you never taught in schools, you never taught in universities. You need to learn what the process is. I mean, what happens in these publishing houses, it's not out there written. The only way you can find out is get into the organizations, whether it's in England or France or whatever it is. Get involved with your local organisations to find out how locally things work. And you might be lucky enough, like I am, to have tripped into something that you happen to be really good at and that people want. I mean, I'm very, very privileged to have publishers say, have you got anything like this? As in, we're looking for something like this that talks about blah, 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 blah. Have you done it? And I might have 20 years ago. So because I keep my notebooks on my shelf and they're all dated by the years, because I do that, I'm able to flip back. I mean, I actually do have the notebooks, as I said, and I can flip through them. I do occasionally. And that's what I was talking to you, I think, about before. I wrote a story, it was 2017, I think I wrote a story that I could never finish. And I just happened to, before Christmas, flip through the book, happened to be the 2017 notebook, and flipped through it and found this story. Because, you know, it's not just that I write it on a page, but sometimes I might write out a whole story, because I handwrite everything first. That would be another really big suggestion. Forget the keyboard, get a pencil and paper, because it takes longer. So what are you doing when it takes longer? You're thinking more. And if you're thinking more, your story's fermenting and gelling, and the jigsaw pieces are all going together. That's why I love the pencil and paper. I mean, I have pencils and papers all over this house, but I flipped through the book and then I came across this one that had a whole bunch of papers clipped together, because that's what I do. I tag them at the top for every story. So books might have only 4 or 5 stories, or they might have 40 or 50 stories in it. No, not 40 or 50, because there's not too many pages, but they might have 20 or 30 stories in it. And they're all tagged at the top. If they end up getting published, they're tagged a different way on the side. If there's a group of pages together, you know, I might have written out the first draft completely, which I usually always do. It's not just an idea on a page. It's usually an idea will sit in their head for a while. And this is stuff I haven't talked about yet, but it'll sit in the head for a while and then it'll gel and ferment and come together. And then I will write out the whole first draft in pencil in the notebook. So all of my novels, or my couple of novels that I've written, 75,000 words plus, handwritten in pencil to be in a notebook on one side of the page, because the other side of the page is used for writing corrections and things like that. But that's what I do. Every single book, even non-fiction books. Computer's the second thing. Putting it on through a keyboard is the second thing I do, or third thing. First thing's thinking, second thing's pencil and paper, the third thing's keyboard. And then, of course, it's copious drafts that I go through until I'm happy with it. But again, it's back to this other story from 2017. I found it in the notebook, but it was unfinished. And then it was refreshed and sitting in my head and was I think less than a week later, I suddenly clicked and got the idea for the end of the story. And I knew where the notebook was. So I was able to pull it off the shelf, pull it out, rewrite it into the 2024 notebook, and wrote the ending as well. Because it's another picture book, of course, but it's rhyming verse, which I don't normally do. So this is really bizarre that I've written a rhyming verse from 2017 that my agent sent back in capital letters. I love it. So that was really, really, really good. So you never know what's going to happen, but this is what happens. It just comes like this. The other thing that happened too with Bear and Rat, this was really different because, as I said, Bear and Rat was never supposed to be published. It was just something I wrote, and my editor hassled me, or didn't hassle me, but she knew what I'd written, so she wanted to have a look at it, and it was more or less snapped up straight away. She adored it, and like most people, when they read it the first time, they cry, and she still cries every time she reads it.
Every time I read it, I cry. Yeah.
Every time I think about it, I
Mhm.
cry. Well, I was in DC. So this is me last week in DC with my zoo friend. We're in there and we're standing at the bookshelves, and I noticed Will We Always Hold Hands, and I pointed out a few other books to her. Just happened to be the bookseller for Politics and Prose was there, and she saw the book, and I said, yeah, because I don't go out and say, oh, did you know I wrote this book? This is my book. Blah. No, sorry, I'm not into that type of promotion. But I pulled it off, and she said, I gave that book to somebody else last week, blah, blah, blah. I cried over it the first time I read it, and I said, yeah, everybody does. And I said, I wrote the book, and that was fun. We talked a little bit about it. Then she went off. Then she brought the store manager and the store children's manager and then somebody else around. So next time I'm in DC, they want me to do something for them there as well because of the book and stuff. That's just the impact it's had all over the world. But the reason I wanted to say that is because, again, it was my agent here. She got it after Penguin Random here had said they want to do it. I think that was the order because I knew my editor. So she got it. And then when it was due to be published in a couple of months' time, but it went to, I think it probably went to Bologna or something like that. And for a 2-week period for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I got separate emails, Japan, Korea, Russia, Germany, France. And then she puts in all caps, are you sitting down in the top of the email? Because I had no idea why she would do that. I sort of had a sense that Bear and Rat was getting a bit of a pickup, but then Bear and Rat went to auction in the States. The problem with that was that I actually knew most of the publishers as well. But, that was really such a blessing.
And did they ask you about changing the title?
Yeah, the title's different, and so's the cover. Same as in Germany, I think, and somewhere else it's a different cover, principally because it had a rat in the title, and rats in New York especially are not well liked. And that was an interesting conundrum for me because I first thought, well, I'm not changing the title, but then I thought, well, what would Benny want? Of course she wanted it changed if that was a kicker for being published in America. It wasn't a kicker, but I knew exactly what she would do because when she was a teacher librarian and she would read things, and if this text wouldn't be suitable for her kids, she'd adapt it. If it was a name that they couldn't understand, she'd adapt it. So I thought, yep, it's going to be changed. That's fine. I don't care. That's why you guys have got Will We Always Hold Hands ? Which is funny for me because when I'm liaising with the publisher about the book, like, I tell them I'm coming over. Do you want me to go and do anything in the bookstores? And they say, yes, please. But we always put in the title, WWAHH ? So the capital letters of the book so that they know. Yeah.
That's really lovely. I really enjoyed talking to you, as I always do, but we do have to contain this a little bit for our listeners, unfortunately, because I could just spend hours talking to you about all of this. But it's time for us to get to our action item. So I would like to offer you the opportunity to share your action item with our listeners now.
Yeah, don't throw out your old stories. Keep them. I've given you an example of what's happened with one. File them away, put them in folders, which I think you can never track a folder anyway. So that's why I put mine in notebooks. But keep records, keep listing those items. Don't throw them out. My notebooks actually have an index in the front of them because I can remember at least the title. So I can flick through the index to look at the different titles of what I was going to call books. But I think the one thing is to write what you know really, really well. And everybody knows something really well. It's what I tell the kids in school. What do you know really well? You know yourself really well. Well, write a story about yourself, but rename it as a different character. Write what you know really, really well. And then if you want to, I think you'll find you'll have unlimited stories to tell based on that alone. I never would have imagined that I'd be writing stories about myself and my godsons, yet I am. A couple of books are about that. And there's a couple more sitting in the notebooks about that. And that's just something I know really well. And it's something that just clicks that emotional button within me, not because I want to write about me, but just happens to be that's what I know really well. And I know my godsons really well, except that they live in Canberra, as I said, so it's a bit harder now. But even so, I still know what they do. I still get to see them a lot, and I hear their stories and I can take their stories. I guess it's also still knowing your audience. After you're writing for yourself, then you need to think about, is this suitable for really young kids? Is it suitable for older kids? Is it not suitable for them? Maybe it's the start of a YA novel. Fantastic. Keep those records, keep those stories, because you will remember things down the track and think, oh, where did I put that? It's in, at least I know it's in a notebook, and I'll just flick through the notebooks. And I've got a couple of friends here who keep newspaper cuttings too. And one of them has a whole filing cabinet of newspaper cuttings. I have no idea how she finds which newspaper cutting she wants to use, but she does. She's very clever like that. And that's what's really critical, because then you'll be really furious with yourself that you've lost it.
Yeah, well, you're much more organized than I am. I have a file drawer and I have files, and I even keep pictures that have inspired me or that I have ideas about, images that I want to tell stories about. So I think that's a fabulous idea to keep track, but to keep it as organized as you do. I'm certainly not nearly that organized, but I do keep my ideas. I think that's a wonderful action item. For my action item, I'm going to go back to something else that you said. The idea of once you've worked on thinking out an idea, doing what you said and writing it down with a pen or a pencil. Once you've gotten it into the computer and you've worked on it there, then you print it out again and get it back into that tactile space, that place where you slow down a bit. You see the words on the paper a little bit differently because now it's a manuscript, and you see the story a little bit differently. When I edit and when I revise, I print everything out because I write novels mainly. So I like to print everything out and get in there with a pen and the paper and that tactile sensation for revision. That's really how I revise best.
Yeah. The printing out's the third stage for me, because I do exactly the same thing. But the very first thing is printing it into the book. And it's all capital letters too, I should add. So the slowest way of doing it is capital letters, 2B pencil, those notebooks. And I never write it in any other type of notebooks because the other ones won't fit on the shelf. So it's got to be that. Every time I go to Hong Kong, I buy 3 or 4 notebooks. So I've always got enough for the rest of the year, because I'm in Hong Kong every year, catching up with the rels. So yeah, it's that type of thing as well. And then it goes through the keyboard, and then it gets printed off, and then I edit it that way. And then I keep that edit. So up in the attic, I have where I keep all the paperwork, which is all going to go down to the National Archives in Canberra shortly. But I have folders of every book that I've ever worked on. It's my book that has every version of every story, every draft that I've gone through. And now I'm printing off all the emails twixt and between the editors and things like that, so that there's an archival record of how this book was created. Because blow me down, people are actually studying me, which I find so bizarre. I mean, really? I'm just a children's author. And
we don't see as much of that as we used to, because people don't write letters anymore, and we don't have the handwritten, and we don't keep a lot of the digital records anymore like we used to. So we don't get to see that process like we once did. So I think that's fabulous. Chris, where else can we find you? I know that we can find you at the SCBWI conferences,
Yes.
But where online and where else can we find you?
So you can get everything through me through my website. So it's chrischeng.com. So it's CHRISCHENG.com. And yeah, my Facebook's there, my Instagram's there. I'm going to do Blue Sky as well. But yeah, certainly get me through that way. Certainly at the SCBWI conferences, I'm usually always hanging around like a bad smell. So yeah, they can pick me up there as well. Ask me. If you've got questions, ask me. You may well not reinvent the wheel, because I've been doing this wheel for a few years now.
Thanks again, Chris, for being here and sharing so much, so generously, as you always do. It's been great having you on the program. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Lovely. It's been good. Fun.
And bye for now.
Cheers.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Coaching Kidlit, a writing and book coaching podcast for writers who want to level up their Kidlit writing game. For more about us and to discover what a book coach can do for you, check out Coaching
coachingkidlit.com and follow us on social media.